Radio Network. I'm Tim Wildman with Ed Vitagliano. Ed, our next guest is with us.
Well, yes, and we're going to talk about folks, if parents, if you have children who are listening, you may want to send them into the next room. This is a very tragic situation that we're dealing with, and our next guest is going to deal with here in the United States, and that is the issue of sex trafficking. So we want to welcome Susan Norris, who's author of the novel Rescuing Hope, a story of sex trafficking in America. Susan, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Well, this is not, we were talking earlier, we got our blood boiling a little bit and got on our soapbox. I know you had to listen to that, Susan. But
That's okay, I agree with you.
But Tim was saying we have to deal with issues that aren't sunshine and rainbows, and this is one of them, the issue of sex trafficking. And there may be some people out there saying, come on, that may happen overseas. It doesn't happen in America, but you have a different story to tell.
This is called the crime hidden in plain sight, and what research is telling us and what the detectives were telling me is that the average age of girl taken into the sex trade is between the ages of 12 and 14, so that's middle school. Some of them that I've encountered have been younger than that. So this is a very real issue. It is happening not just in the inner city, but it's happening in suburban America. It's not a respecter of persons. It impacts black, white, Hispanic, Asian, poor, rich. We really just can't get away from it, and we have to deal with it.
Susan, thanks for being on with us. How long have you been involved in this issue?
About 3 years I've been walking with survivors and researching and writing my book and really getting involved in lobbying for stiffer penalties for perpetrators and more resources for the survivors.
What triggered your interest?
I actually encountered one of the ladies on the front lines at a luncheon she was hosting to inform and educate the community while I was working with a ministry called the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I was a sponsor for FCA in a middle school, so I had spent 4 years living life with students between the ages of 12 and 14. So when I learned the statistic, it wasn't just a number out there for me. I saw faces of young men and young women that I'd spent 4 years of my life pouring into and knew that based on what I was hearing, any one of them could become a victim.
Susan, why did you, and we do want to, of course, unpack some of the nitty-gritty on this issue, but why did you choose a novel as the form of your book to bring to people's attention this issue of sex trafficking?
Prior to my work in ministry, I was an educator, and also my ministry time has been spent with middle school and high school students. So from both perspectives, I know the only way you're going to get a student to read a nonfiction book is if you assign them something that's going to give them a letter grade at the end of the day. They just typically don't run out, most of them anyway, and pick up a nonfiction book to read about something. But they are prone to pick up novels and pass them around to their friends. So I knew that teenage girls would read a novel and I could pack it full of information and educate them unknowingly so that I could equip them to hopefully prevent themselves from becoming a victim and even their peers.
Where your book is available at, what is your website?
My website is susannorris.org, O-R-G, and you can purchase the book there. It's also at Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com as well.
A story of sex trafficking in America. You know, we've done a few interviews on this topic over the years, and what I never see this, or do I, Susan?
You probably see it and you don't even realize it. I know prior to stepping into this fight, I would see young girls that looked like they were dressed a little too beyond their age. The kids say that she's dressing too fast for her age. And I would see them in the mall or in a restaurant, a fast food restaurant or something, and I would tend to move my family away from those young ladies, particularly because I have a son. I didn't want him exposed to that. But what I realized is many times these young ladies are put in very dangerous situations. They are manipulated by the mind as well as physically manipulated. And so they may be out waiting for a client, they refer to them as Johns, in a fast food restaurant, or they may be going in to get their reward for making their quota and get to go into a McDonald's and get a Happy Meal. So instead of avoiding these young ladies now, I tend to try and strike up a conversation with them, being very mindful that their pimp may be close by, but one, to let them know that someone sees them, and two, to look for an opportunity to find out if they do need to be rescued, if they do want to leave the life. Many times these young ladies do not even self-identify as victims until they've been taken out of the situation.
Now, are you talking, when I think of this subject, sex trafficking, that we're talking about here today, and as Ed said, I want to caution you if you have children around, because this is a very tough subject to deal with on the radio. But I think of kidnapped people, who are been taken away from their homes or their families, and they've been sold into sex slavery.
Like the movie Taken or something like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what people think of.
That's a great movie. A lot of people, that's their only interaction or education on the issue. Victims of sex trafficking are taken by three different forms. There's force, fraud, and coercion. And force is exactly like you've seen in the movie Taken, where a young girl is not in any place that is unsafe for her necessarily, but someone steps into her safe place and extracts her. It is a virtual kidnapping that takes place. I talked with a young family whose child was walking home from the bus stop. She was doing nothing wrong, and a pimp got very savvy and started tracking bus traffic and the flow of bus traffic, looking for where a girl was walking by herself. He determined this young lady walked a quarter mile by herself, so he hit his van, which was really looked like a white-paneled van that a painter or a plumber would use. And when she came close, he got out and duct-taped her hands and her mouth, threw her in the back, and drug her past her classmates. She was gone for 3 years before she was rescued. So that's force. Then there's fraud. That's the common, oh, sweetheart, you should be in modeling. I can get you in a music video, where they present one thing, but when they get them out of their safety place into another location, the reality hits of what they're there for. Or it may be something even more smooth and unsuspecting, like they'll use a lure, someone who will come in, pose as a friend, poses someone with some interest, and get them from their safety zone to a place that's unsafe. It could be, come spend the night at my house, one girl to another. It could be, come to this party. They use a variety of techniques to get a girl from point A to point B, where they will then typically order a gang rape and then take her into the lifestyle. And then the third is coercion, and that's where social media comes into play huge, where these guys are flirting with girls, they're friending their friends, they're posting comments on their walls, trying to tear down any safety precautions that these girls may have put in place. And they love these girls. They want to be their boyfriend. Or if it's a case of a runaway, they want to be their rescuer and feed them and give them a place to stay. And so the victim then places some trust in this individual. And that's misplaced trust, because as soon as he can get her away from her surroundings that she's familiar with, he'll play the sympathy card of, I can't pay the bills anymore, and I need you to help me this way. And he'll get her to agree to do this one time. Keep in mind, that's not choosing. That's mind manipulation. And then once she's agreed once, he's taking pictures, he's videoing it, he's threatening YouTube, he's threatening to send the pictures to her school, to the local paper, and he's got her because she's 12 or 13. She doesn't know how this world truly operates. She doesn't know that he's not going to go and cash in on the threats to her siblings or her parents that he has laid before her. So she continues to function in that lifestyle.
Susan Norris is our guest. Her book is called Rescuing Hope, Hope. It's a novel, a story of sex trafficking in America. And her website is susannorris.org, susannorris.org. Do you have any numbers, or maybe you mentioned them already, in maybe the U.S., and then I don't know how you factor the world, into something.
Yeah.
How do you do that? But how big a problem this is in terms of numbers?
Well, globally, it's been estimated that there are 27 million slaves in the world today. And in the United States, Shared Hope International just released a statistic stating that there are 100,000 children being trafficked in the United States currently. And
Trafficked
at
for
any given
sex?
time, excuse me?
Trafficked for sex?
Trafficked for sex. And then at any given time, there are 300,000 children that are at risk. So this is a huge issue. It has been documented that there have been cases in all 50 states. It is not just a big city issue. It's not just an inner city issue.
That takes a lot of evil people. I'm not talking about, just secular people. I'm talking about evil
Right.
people who basically serving the devil with their life's work, and there's that many of them out there.
They are definitely taking advantage of the vulnerable and manipulating our children for their own financial gain and another person's twisted pleasure.
Are these gangs? Are these, the mob? Or cartels? Or who does
Yeah, because
this?
we just had this case in Cleveland, Ohio. Was it in Cleveland where this guy had
held
these
the three women for-
since they were girls? So that looked more like allegedly, I should say, but looked more like an individual who was preying on people. So is it these individuals? Is it, like Tim asked, is it the mob? Are these gangs? What is the primary offender?
The sad reality is that it's all of those. I've talked with detectives who've said that this is definitely gang-related in some cases, where gangs will either abduct a girl and then use her to fund their gang activity. They will also require females that want to be inducted into the gang to serve the gang in this way. It is individuals who are out to make a fast buck for themselves, and then it's also very networked. There have been different pimp rings that in the Atlanta area, the detective I talked to, they just took down a pimp ring, which is multiple pimps that work in their own arenas, but then also partner together. If one gets a tip about an area where there's a high demand, they'll corporately move their girls from state to state. And that high demand is dictated by large gatherings of male and female population. It's not just men buying these children. I want to make that clear. It's men and women. But you have sporting events. Anywhere where there's a national sporting event, whether it's NFL, Major League Baseball, basketball, whatever, you have a large gathering of people together that are in a festive mood. The girls have told me themselves, whenever the Falcons play or the Hawks play or the Braves play, their quotas double. So the amount of money they're required to bring in a given night doubles. You have major conventions that go to larger cities, and that brings in an excess of population for that city, so you have a higher demand. Unfortunately, there are corporations that knowingly or unknowingly entertain their clientele by hiring escorts, and many times these are young girls who are being forced to service clients by a pimp.
Do they, how many of these kinds of girls, or boys for that matter, have you talked to personally and interviewed and helped?
I've sat through multiple interviews, about 6 months of interviewing girls and families, and as well as detectives. I sat with a former pimp who has given his life to the Lord and has turned it around, and was able to gain insight from him from that vantage point. I partner with multiple ministries in the metro Atlanta area that are involved in and rescues and hotlines for these young ladies. So in the past 3 years, multiples. And the sad reality is I've talked to young girls and I've talked to women in their 40s that were taken when they were 10 and 12. And their story is the same. They did not choose this. This was forced upon them.
Susan, let me ask you this question, and it may I don't mean this to sound insult you. I believe this is a very real problem, but I do remember in the 80s there was a scare in the country about satanic cults and daycare centers and some of these things, and so everywhere people looked, then they started saying, "I think that there are Satanists." I think that. So how do you get this information out to people without people seeing trafficked girls everywhere they go? Because you talked about girls that may be dressing fast. There may be lots of girls who are dressing fast. How does a person know that this person sitting in McDonald's 2 tables over may have been trafficked? How do they get the law involved without becoming those people who see a devil under every bush?
Absolutely. There are indicators that have been created, a list of indicators. You can find them under free resources on my website, susannorris.org. And we do have a list of various indicators because educators can be involved, and as well as shop workers, and really you and I can be involved as we gain insight. Our law enforcement has been trained on the indicators as well. But if you are questioning if someone is being trafficked or not, the safest thing to do is to call the hotline number. Polaris Project has a national hotline. It's on my website. The state of Georgia has a hotline number, and several other states do as well. And report what you're seeing, and let the authorities who are trained in this determine if a girl is actually being trafficked or not. I would rather err on the side of assuming someone is and being wrong than not, and having the opportunity to rescue a young lady and missing it. But whether she's being trafficked or just dressing too fast, as the kids like to say, she needs to know that somebody sees her. She needs to know that somebody cares. She may not at that point be a trafficking victim, but she's ripe for the picking for any pimp coming by.